So we're reading The Golden Goose by the Grimm brothers. We'll read the story and then we'll talk about it. There was once a man who had three sons, the youngest of whom was called Dummling, which means simpleton, and was despised, mocked, and sneered on at every occasion. It happened that the eldest wanted to go into the forest to hew wood. And before he went, his mother gave him a beautiful sweet cake and a bottle of wine, in order that he might not suffer from hunger or thirst. When he entered the forest, he met a little gray-haired old man who bade him good day and said, "Do give me a piece of cake out of your pocket, and let me have a draught of your wine. I am so hungry and thirsty." But the clever son answered, "If I give you my cake and wine, I shall have none for myself. Be off with you." And he left the little man standing and went on. But when he began to hew down a tree, it was not long before he made a false stroke, and the axe cut him in the arm, so that he had to go home and have it bound up. And this was the little gray man's doing. After this, the second son went into the forest, and his mother gave him, like the eldest, a cake and a bottle of wine. The little old gray man met him likewise, and asked him for a piece of cake and a drink of wine. But the second son, too, said sensibly enough, "What I give you will be taken away from myself. Be off." And he left the little man standing and went on. His punishment, however, was not delayed, and when he had made a few blows at the tree, he struck himself in the leg, so that he had to be carried home. Then Dummling said, "Father, do let me go and cut wood." The father answered, "Your brothers have hurt themselves with it. Leave it alone. You do not understand anything about it." But Dummling begged so long that at last he said, "Just go then. You will get wiser by hurting yourself." His mother gave him a cake made with water and baked in the cinders, and with it a bottle of sour beer. When he came to the forest, the little old gray man met him likewise, and greeting him said, "Give me a piece of your cake and a drink out of your bottle. I am so hungry and thirsty." Dummling answered, "I have only cinder cake and sour beer. If that pleases you, we will sit down and eat." So they sat down, and when Dummling pulled out his cinder cake, it was a fine, sweet cake, and the sour beer had become good wine. So they ate and drank, and after that the little man said, "Since you have such a good heart and are willing to divide what you have, I will give you good luck. There stands an old tree. Cut it down, and you will find something at the roots." Then the little man took leave of him. Dummling went and cut down the tree, and when it fell, there was a goose sitting in the roots, with feathers of pure gold. He lifted her up, and taking her with him, went to an old, went to an inn where he thought he would stay the night. Now the host had three daughters who saw the goose and were curious to know what such a wonderful bird might be, and would have liked to have one of its golden feathers. The eldest thought, "I shall soon find an opportunity of pulling out a feather." And as soon as Dummling had gone out, she seized the goose by the wing, but her finger and hand remained sticking fast to it. The second came soon afterwards, thinking only of how she might get a feather for herself, but she had scarcely touched her sister than she was held fast. At last the third also came with the like intent, and the others screamed out, "Keep away, for goodness sake, keep away." But she did not understand why she was to keep away. "The others are there," she thought. I may as well be there too," and ran to them. But as soon as she had touched her sister, she remained sticking fast to her. So they had to spend the night with the goose. The next morning, Dummling took the goose under his arm and set out, without troubling herself about the three girls that were hanging on to it. They were obliged to run after him continually, now left, now right, wherever his legs took him. In the middle of the fields, the parson met them. And when he saw the procession, he said, "For shame, you good-for-nothing girls. Why are you running across the field after this young man? Is that seemly? At the same time, he seized the youngest by the hand in order to pull her away. But as soon as he touched her, he likewise stuck fast, and was himself obliged to run behind. Before long, the sexton came and saw his master, the parson, running behind three girls. He was astonished at this and called out, "Hi, your reverence! Whither away so quickly? Do not forget that we have a christening today." And, running after him, he took him by the sleeve, but was also held fast to it. Whilst the five were trotting thus one behind the other, two laborers came with their hoes from the fields. The parson called out to them and begged that they would set him and the sexton free. But they had scarcely touched the sexton when they were held fast, and now there were 7 of them running behind Dummling and the goose. Soon afterwards he came to a city, where a king ruled who had a daughter who was so serious that no one could make her laugh. So he had put forth a decree that whoever should be able to make her laugh should marry her. When Dummling heard this, he went with his goose and all her train before the king's daughter. And as soon as she saw the 7 people running on, one behind the other, she began to laugh quite loudly, and as if she would never stop. Thereupon Dummling asked to have her for his wife. But the king did not like the son-in-law, and made all manner of excuses, and said that he must first produce a man who could drink a cellar full of wine. Dummling thought of the little gray man who could certainly help him, so he went into the forest, and in the same place where he had felled the tree, he saw a man sitting who had a very sorrowful face. Dummling asked him what he was taking to heart so sorely, and he answered, "I have such a great thirst and cannot quench it. Cold water I cannot stand. A barrel of wine I have just emptied, but that to me is like a drop on a hot stone." "There, I can help you," said Dummling. "Just come with me and you shall be satisfied." He led him into the king's cellar, and the man bent over the huge barrels and drank till his loins hurt. And before the day was out, he had the king he had emptied all the barrels. Then Dummling asked once more for his bride, but the king was vexed that such an ugly fellow, whom everyone called Dummling, should take away his daughter, and he made a new condition. He first must find a man who could eat a whole mountain of bread. Dummling did not think long, but went straight into the forest, where, in the same place, there sat a man who was tying up his body with a strap, and making an awful face, and saying, "I have eaten a whole oven full of rolls, but what good is that when one has such a hunger as I? My stomach remains empty, and I must tie myself up if I am not to die of hunger." At this Dummling was glad, and said, "Get up and come with me. You shall eat yourself full." He led him to the king's palace, where all the flour in the whole kingdom was collected, and from it he caused a huge mountain of bread to be baked. The man from the forest stood before it, began to eat, and by the end of one day the whole mountain had vanished. Then Dummling for the third time asked for his bride, but the king again sought a way out, and ordered a ship which could sail on land and on water. "As soon as you came sailing back in it," he said, "you shall have my daughter for wife." Dummling went straight into the forest, and there sat the little gray man to whom he had given his cake. When he heard what Dummling wanted, he said, "Since you have given me to eat and to drink, I will give you the ship. And I do all this because you were once kind to me." Then he gave him the ship which could sail on land and water. And when the king saw that, he could no longer prevent him from having his daughter. The wedding was celebrated, and after the king's death, Dummling inherited his kingdom and lived for a long time contentedly with his wife. So, what did you think of this story?
Well,
You're
I
not
noticed
you're
it was,
normally the girl that no one can make laugh, but today somehow it's very different.
uh, well, yeah, I thought it was just about two outcasts helping each other. Um, and that helps them both solve their problems in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, two outcasts who obviously have potential, but no one sees it, even to the point where the youngest son is called Dummling. Is called Simpleton. And so even in his name, he is ridiculed and outcast and underestimated completely. And even to the end, he is still, Dummling. Perhaps if this story went on, he could be rechristened or something. But in the end, it is King Dummling that
mhm,
rules.
mhm. And yeah, actually, the little gray man never has a proper name either. He's just the little gray man.
Yeah,
Uh,
and he's sort of a woodlands or a forest or yeah, a cast, outside of society. And he has magical properties. I sort of thought of him as like a
mhm,
dwarf. There's kind of this motif of like a dwarf on the road
mhm,
that in other stories is, underestimated, of course, by the first two brothers, who is ignored by the first two brothers, who won't, uh, go along with a simple request of his. In this case, it's to share food. In
mhm,
another story we read, it was to share information. But basically, it's kind of an acknowledgement and some kind of small offering.
mhm,
But this story also seems to be about excess, right? And greed and stinginess or
mhm,
generosity. But that's still about kind of, if you want something, or if you're going to get something in life, you have to offer first. And other people just want to take. They want to seek and take.
mhm,
So the first two brothers want to seek and go out into the woods and take the trees. And the three daughters of the innkeeper later in the story, they're entranced by the golden goose and want its feather.
mhm. Yeah, then at the start of the story, the mother of the brothers, she withholds the good food from Dummling
Yeah,
and only gives it to the first two brothers.
yeah. Yeah, I thought maybe that meant that, yeah, they were calculating. I mean, it makes sense that if the first two brothers, who are especially given that they are uh, thought to be more gifted, more promising, um, yeah, she's kind of calculating, let's not waste food on this younger brother. We've
Mhm.
already lost a lot of our investment,
Yeah,
so to speak.
yeah, and the father kind of continues it by trying to withhold opportunities for him too, since he's initially not allowing him to go cut wood in the forest.
Yeah, you could look at it that way. I thought maybe he's also, he only has one son left or something. But anyway, he doesn't have faith in Dummling. But we were thinking that with the goose, later on when the innkeeper's daughters and then others touch it, it's only the first two people, or maybe the first three people, the three daughters, are sort of greedy for the goose. But then after that, the people that touch them aren't. And what is the explanation of that? And I thought that maybe it is that even though the ones after the daughter are not greedy, that it's kind of like it's a social contagion or something. Once greediness starts to become part of the social milieu, then it kind of takes on a life of its own or something.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of saying that even because the last two people had good intentions with trying to help, but like you're saying, like even with good intentions, like once that kind of stuff starts spreading, it hurts everyone, no matter
Right.
what their intentions may be.
Yeah. Yeah, right. By the way, I noticed a detail here that at the beginning of the story, when Dummling asked Father to let him go cut wood, and he had to beg so long at last that he gave in to his request. Um, his mother gave him a cake made with water and baked in the cinders, and with it a bottle of sour beer. So this is, there's a little bit of an echo here of like the lowest child, the one that the parents don't have any faith in, who ends up ascending to the highest in the land, so to speak. Cinderella becomes a princess. This association with the cinders, with the base material, the ash. There's of course a Christian meaning with that, but also it's kind of a nutritive, but kind of nutritive for the soil. Ashes, I think, but it's this sort of low kind of base matter, that people do not that people underestimates. Something else about the character of Dummling is that he kind of has a strong will. He kind of does what he wants to do and is not dissuaded by people. That happens throughout the story. Like at the beginning, father and mother had not wanted him to go out in the forest to hew wood, but they eventually gave in because he was so persistent. And later on, when the three daughters are sticking to the golden goose, I mean, it's time for him to move on. So he just grabs the goose, and the story says, without even, uh, you know, taking heed that there's three girls that are attached to this goose, he just keeps going on. And then, yeah, later when he fulfills the requirement set by the king of making his daughter laugh to have her hand in marriage, and it doesn't work, the king gives him three increasingly harder tasks, and he just kind of does them. It's almost like he always does what it takes. He never really seems to. He never shows that he even minds. He just kind of does what's necessary.
Yeah, it's like in a lot of the other stories, they're kind of a lot of sometimes the characters despair for a little bit before
Hmm.
finding a solution. That
Yeah.
Sonny just does, like you're saying.
Maybe that's part of his strength, and maybe is he dumber, or at least he's literally dumber in that he doesn't talk as much or something. He just does what is necessary or something. And there's a sort of opposite here or is there sort of parallel with the princess too, who no one can make laugh? So she's the princess who no one can make laugh except for him, and he's the person that everyone thinks is dumb, maybe because he doesn't speak in the normal conventional way. Yeah, they're both unconventional in some way, right? So just thinking of how this story is kind of about excess, there's the three trials that the king tries to put Dumbling through, or I don't know if they're trials or just sort of impossible tasks, right? But he does them seemingly without complaint. He has to find someone who could, um, a man who can drink a cellar full of wine, and he goes back into the forest and he finds someone who's, needs to drink a cellar full of wine practically, and he comes, and then the king seemingly invents another weird, impossible task of someone who can eat a mountain of bread, and he finds someone like that, and finally he has to find a um, a boat that can sail on land and water, a ship that can sail on land and water, and he does that. Yeah, seemingly without complaint. You and I had talked about how that may be a sign of Dumling's versatility, kind of his adaptability. Um, and I had pointed out how it's seemingly like kind of a paradox, right? A ship that can sail on the land also, but there's a lot of paradoxes in sort of spiritual gifts, right? Like
Mhm.
they're kind of magical in that maybe they can help you do seemingly impossible or opposite kinds of things, and that's seemingly comes from kind of the nimbleness of mind that happens from sort of some kind of spiritual progress or spiritual awakening where your mind is more connected than it was before, and you can understand things in sort of a much more kind of complex and unconventional way, which is, again, a link to seemingly dumbling there. So you were saying to me that there's a kind of a parallel between the beginning and the end of the story in terms of there being very little and then abundancy and need.
Yeah, yeah, they got the start of the story. There isn't enough of the cake or wine because of the mom's stinginess, but giving it to Dumbling to where she only gave him the sour beer and the stale cinder cake. Um, but but the little gray man is able to help Dumbling, and by turning that cinder cake into beer into a sweet cake and wine, and they both share it. And then towards the end, now that Donnelly has access to access cake and wine, he pays it back to the little gray man by letting him kind of eat himself to his heart's content at the cellar and with all those loaves of bread um, when when he needs his help.
Right, yeah. And there's this general arc of kind of dumbling through his will and his faith and generosity and all his virtues and his lack of kind of worry about the things that most people conventionally care about. He's able to get abundancy in his life and to rise in his life, through his generosity and um, concern for the gray man, for the little gray man. He is able to get the goose, which eventually leads him to getting the princess, and then he can bring it full circle, yeah, back to the gray man in the forest. But there's this kind of, yeah, there was like a lack of progress, a lack of going along on a journey in life at the beginning of the story when the first two brothers are trying to hew wood, but only paying attention to practical concerns. I'm going to the forest to hew wood, and then there's this annoying little man that wants to share my food, but I need my strength to cut wood. And so there's this kind of idea that they're overly practical, stingy, and if they had been more generous and less narrowly calculating, then they would have got what they wanted. And that happens later on with the so-called dumb person that everybody is just not wise enough to understand, is not dumb at all. He is able to advance in life and to kind of bring everything full circle and like sort of he becomes the king because he is able to restore the sort of I don't know, what can you say, the how the different parts of the soul in an individual or the different parts of a society feed each other and help each other. And
Mhm. Yeah, and I think Dummling, he just represents the kind of balanced person or soul to where he's not controlled by things or materials, but he's still able to use them wisely to kind of contribute or to society or or people. But
yeah,
he's
that
not like
seems.
bound. He's not bound by them or controlled by it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a key to the story. I mean, what you said is almost that he's not stuck to things for themselves, which is exactly what happens later on with almost all the rest of symbolically members of society, the innkeeper's daughter, property, the parson and the sexton, the established religion, the workers. That's like the productivity, the industry of society. And Dummling, I think, represents the sort of more ineffable sort of leadership quality in society that's harder to predict who will be a good leader. So he represents wisdom, I guess. And we kind of have this, yeah, this division in society and the mind here between these various parts. But yeah, he is the one that is able to use things properly because he's not attached to them. He knows their proper use at the proper time and everything, and he almost doesn't question his. He has a sense. It's like he has a sense that he will share his sour beer and his cinder baked bread with the little gray man. He will go on in his journey with the goose. He will return the favor to the forest dwarves by helping them to the king's bounty, and himself in the process become the good leader that the king was not, as shown by his daughter who could not laugh. You know, it's there's no happiness, joy, love in that house. You know, it's something like that. There's no flowing of energy in the king's house, and the supposedly dumb person who is not who no one had faith in, uh, no human in society had faith in, only the forest dwelling dwarf who he had a connection with of sort of uh, some kind of brotherhood of man kind of thing with helps him out. But yeah, I think that's what Dummling represents. He's the leadership, the wisdom in society and in the individual human mind. Yeah, I think that's a great insight.
Yeah, and I think by showing that he's not attached to objects or things, it like you said, it shows his wisdom that he won't be attached to power either. So, um, yeah, like you said, it kind of leads to that conclusion in my mind, at least, to kind of show that he is going to be a good leader.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good. Yeah, he won't be attached to power. He's not trying to become the king for any particular reason to rule over others. It's just sort of, I mean, is that what he was trying to do in the first place? To try to become king, or he wasn't even trying to become the leader, right?
No, it seemed like he was just trying to have, find some happiness with like, finding a wife. So, uh, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary to me.
Yeah.
Um,
And that almost reminds me of Plato's Republic and like the leader to be trusted is the one who does not seek it. In fact, who does not really want to be the leader. But yeah, he's not seeking it. Uh, but if he didn't seek, but yeah, he's just trying to be have a wife, and also maybe he needs to make the king fulfill his promise. I mean, the king had made this promise to the
Mhm.
realm in general, and it's an injustice for him to not try to fulfill that covenant just because he doesn't like the cut of the jib or the ugliness, as the story says, of Dummling. And it says also that he doesn't like that this guy is called Dummling. You know, it's he has this petty. It shows that the king has sort of a pettiness. You know, this a high regard for for opinion. Yeah. And then finally, the king can no longer um, deny Dummling as his son-in-law and and the inheritor of his kingdom when Dummling is able to show true sort of mastery of life, or we talked about it as nimbleness or adaptation of mind in making a truly remarkable thing, which is the boat that can sail, the impossible thing, the boat that can sail on land and sea, which isn't that kind of, yeah, a symbol of like he's like a magician or a wizard. And of course a wizard is the word itself means wise person. So it's this idea that maybe, you know, wisdom is sort of magical. It can make uh, out of seemingly normal materials. It's some kind of alchemy of making something special and beautiful that can transform others. Okay, but yeah, that's a pretty enjoyable story about wisdom and leadership and and conventionality. But any more thoughts about that story for now?
Not so far.
Okay, so but yeah, we have more thoughts in the future about stories about objects of mystery, transformation that bring out virtue of different characters that show the usefulness or the goodness of and beauty of various characters, and maybe we'll read another one of those next time. And until then, yeah, I enjoyed this.